it's Dr. Brian McDonough, and welcome to the Dr. Brian McDonough Show. I'm happy to have what I would call part two of a segment with Dr. Raymond Singer. You may have seen our other segment. If you haven't, I suggest you watch it. We're talking about a lot of different things about health and, of course, his new book. And I wanted to ask you, Dr. Singer, a little bit about diet. We started to touch on it, but I think there was a lot more we could say about your approach to diet, especially as we get older, and the dangers of the word diet.
Yeah. I'll tell you, Brian, as I say in my book, what we really need to do is eliminate the word diet from our vocabulary. Dieting, particularly the way it is today with a lot of the fad diets, can be actually very dangerous to your health. If you think about the first three letters of the word diet is D-I-E, die. Maybe not that dramatic, but it can be very harmful in this way. First, you have to understand that if you go on a diet, that means that you're eventually going to go off a diet. What we really should be doing is considering lifestyle changes. The problem with diets today is that most of them utilize very fast weight loss. In other words, they're based on taking way too few calories. Some are even, as you know, fasting diets. And what happens in those circumstances is that the body doesn't really like us to have low glucose levels, particularly the brain. And so to maintain sugar in the blood and for the brain to use, it does a process known as gluconeogenesis, which means it takes proteins and breaks it down into sugars. Now, what happens is you'll lose weight. You might feel good. You might be happy that you've lost weight. You've lost some fat, but you've also lost protein. Here's how the vicious cycle goes. You go on the diet, you lose weight, you lose fat, but you also lose protein. Now you go off the diet. And when you go off the diet, invariably, you're going to end up taking in more calories than you can use. And guess what? The body only knows how to store calories in one form, and that's in the form of fat. Calories in minus calories out equals weight loss or weight gain. So the vicious cycle, again, is that you lose weight on a fad diet, you lose fat, you lose protein, but when you go off the diet, you just gain back fat. And it's not just any fat, it's dangerous fat that might infiltrate your muscles, your liver, and even your heart.
A lot of people might say, oh, well, then what's the use of dieting? I'm not going to diet. I don't think that's the message either. I think what it is kind of more like I think you're talking about a lifelong approach or trying to change habits big time.
Right. I think it has to be a slow approach. I know that's difficult for people. It's frustrating. Sure, there can be a kickstart into this, but ultimately, even patients who are taking some of the newer medications, the GLP-1s like Ozempic, Mounjaro, Zepbound, early studies have shown that unless they make lifestyle changes, they will gain the weight back. And so I recommend common sense things in my book, such as 6 small meals a day. As I've already alluded to, I'm not a fan of fasting diets, and I'm not a fan of crash diets. But eating healthily, exercising daily, and having the right mental health is all part of what I refer to in the book as the 3 E's: eating, exercise, and emotion. I think we make eating too complicated. You can go by rule number 1. I give 10 rules in the book, and that is nothing bad in me. I mean, it's not that difficult to figure out that, eating something that's deep fried with lots of sugar is not particularly good for you. Whole grains. The Mediterranean diet is probably the most common sense diet out there. And the other word besides nothing bad in me, the other phrase is just everything in moderation. I don't want anybody to go through life without ever eating ice cream or cake again. But do you really need, several cocktails, the salad, another appetizer, the entree, and dessert? I mean, cut your losses somewhere. Maybe not finish the entree, or maybe cut out the appetizer. These are the things that I discuss in the book that are common sense. We all know this, but practicing it is a different story.
It's interesting you bring that up. One of the first television stories I ever did, gosh, way back, was on diet. And it was like a 5-part series on diet. And I interviewed a Dr. Gordon Stunkard, who was elderly at the time. And he was a diet expert at Penn, University of Pennsylvania. And he showed me a bookcase, and every single book in this bookcase, and it was a huge bookcase, was a diet book. And he said, these are the diet books I've collected in my extensive career. Most of them were just books that came out in public, because many of these were very popular. They sold very well, and they were hot for about 3 or 4 months. But guess what? We haven't done anything to take care of this problem. And I think that's what you're getting at. Even now, we have patients who are on the GLP-1s or on those medications, and they're excited to have them. But those who do not change their habits are starting to put the weight back on.
And it's not just the eating habits. And the word habit is really important here, because what happens over time is that we tend, when we have bad habits, to continue them. But guess what? We can take our good habits and continue them, and then that becomes a habit too. So in my book, I Used to Be an Athlete, which your followers can find on Amazon, I talk about the 3 E's: eating, exercise, and emotion. For example, with exercise, it's really, again, in moderation every day. Walking is probably the best exercise for those of us who are over 50. I just turned 67. I can't run on the pavements anymore. I'll end up with knee replacements and hip replacements. But walking every day, or swimming, is a terrific exercise if you have access to that, or using an elliptical. It's the kind of exercise when you're at work. Don't take the elevators. Go up and down the stairs, even 2-3 stairs at a time, if you can do so. One of the things I talk about, Brian, is the Dunkin' Donut issue, where you'll go by a Dunkin' Donut or a Starbucks or Chick-fil-A, and you'll see cars 30 deep. And I always wonder why people don't just park the car, walk for a second, and then go to the counter where there's nobody waiting. Or when you go to Target or your shopping center stores, instead of fighting for a parking spot up front, why not park as far away as you can in the parking lot? For one thing, you'll get fewer dings on your car, but just take a moment to walk those extra few steps. Exercising is also not that complicated.
You brought that up, and I thought it was important in your book. And of course, we're talking about your book, I Used to Be an Athlete, where you're talking about, and we also talked to a large extent in our first part of this interview, but you talked in your book about workplace and those things. And I think that's something we don't all take advantage of, the ability to use the workplace to get that extra exercise.
Yeah. So I happen to work at a beautiful campus. I know you're familiar with it. It's Jefferson Einstein Montgomery Hospital. It's out in East Norton, Pennsylvania. It's a gorgeous campus. It's right across from the Norristown Farm Park, which has about 5 miles of trails in there. And when we can, and of course, always keeping patient safety first, my team will walk around the campus during the nice weather. I understand we're going to be having a warm up this week, and we talked about it today. It was a little chilly today, but we still took a walk outside. And it's those little things that add up. And in terms of being a habit, I always say to people, you take a shower every day, right? We go into the bathroom every day. And imagine how we would feel if we didn't shower every day. We wouldn't feel right, because showering every day has become a part of us. Well, whether it's eating in a healthy fashion or exercising every day or focusing on our mental health, the question I have to ask you is, why not? Why don't you feel uncomfortable when you don't exercise? You should feel uncomfortable. And what happens is, once you get into this lifestyle change of eating better, using common sense, moderation, exercising daily, focusing on your mental health, it becomes you and you become it. And so it is a very positive habit, and you can just focus on that every day. And then you're not trying after a while. Months, years go by, and it is who you are. That's the goal in mind.
I'll leave you with that comment. And it's funny you say that, because it brings back a memory. I remember in my 20s in particular, if you didn't work out or didn't do something, you felt very bad about it, because it was a part of your life. And then over time, life gets to you and you don't go out and do as much of the exercise. And it's easy to get out of that routine. So I think what you're saying is start slowly. It doesn't have to be aggressive, but make it part of your life, and that will work. Well,
yeah, it's a triangle with mental health at the top, eating and exercise at the bottom of the triangle, but it's an equilateral triangle. You can't have one without the other. One of the more common questions patients ask me is, how can I reduce my stress in my life? And guess what? You can reduce your stress in your life by doing moderate exercise every day and eating more healthily. Not that we shouldn't think of eating as only fuel, but it is. It's fuel for our body. And if we start thinking in terms of healthy mindsets, your stress levels will come down, you'll sleep better. Of course, there are other aspects that are in the book, like drinking water and so on. But eating, exercise, and emotion It's a very simple concept to understand, and yet why don't we do it? I hope people who follow you and beyond will continue on this healthy pathway, and maybe my 3 E's will help them a little bit.
Dr. Raymond Singer, thanks for joining us on the program. It was great to have you on the Dr.
Thank
Brian
you,
McDonough
Brian.
Show. Thank you.
Thanks for all you do.